Why hello there, and welcome to another tank review. I'm Corny Swiss, and today we're looking at the Panther G, rank 4, 6.7 battle rating, medium tank for the Germans. Now, if you don't want to watch the garage portion of this review, which is fine, there's timestamps down below for the simulator gameplay, realistic gameplay, or just the opinion if you're rushed. So feel free to click those timestamps and watch the various parts you want to watch. But if you want to see the in-garage portion of this review, let's get started. So the Panther G represents the most mass-produced version of the Panther. And in terms of design, it's extremely similar to like the Panther D, for example, which was an early model. The main difference is that German designers realized that on, for example, the Panther D, the gun mantlet is actually curved down like the top, just on the bottom. So, for example, this part wouldn't be here. And that created a shot trap, which could cause problems for the driver and the transmission and all kinds of bad things. So the Panther G, the main modification was to change this turret design, make it so that if a shell connected with this part of the turret, it wouldn't just ricochet down into the tank. Right? It's not good. In addition, the hull armor was made a little bit thicker, and portions of the storage space inside the tank was actually changed around a little bit. But for the most part, it's the same tank you get at rank 3, 6.0 battle rating. Same gun as well. Now, there are some differences, but we'll talk about that. So what are you getting with this Panther G? So, like I said, rank 4, 6.7 battle rating. What will this tank see? You'll see T-44s, you'll see IS-3s, ZSU 57-2s, both IS-2s, and you can see as low as IS-1s and things like that. So 6.7 is a pretty solid battle rating to be at, because you don't face 8.0 battle ratings, and competition is fairly decent. It's good on both sides. The G, I think, probably stacks up as one of the weaker rank 4 German tanks, but it's certainly not a bad tank. Now, mass, 44.8 tons. Fairly heavy tank. It's not that bad. 600 horsepower, 2,500 RPM, 46 km per hour top speed. Okay. It's not... The thing with German tanks is they're generally not really fast, but they generally have grunt in the engine. And this tank is no different. It has a decent top speed, good top speed, really. Good grunt in the engine, and it's not too heavy for that to be an issue. I don't think it won't accelerate the same as a Russian tank, but it is faster than the heavy tanks, and it can get moving in a hurry. And because it's lighter, the hull traverse, turning the hull, is actually much easier. You can go up a 41-degree slope, which, I mean, if you want to, you can. 15 degree per second turret rotation, that's plenty good enough. That's, I believe, pretty standard for German tanks. The King Tigers have a faster one, but that's not bad. The turret rotation is not what's going to kill you. Vertical guidance, 8 degrees of gun depression, 20 degrees of elevation. Both plenty good. 20 degrees of elevation is plenty. 8 degrees of gun depression is great. Right? It's not Russian, so we actually have some gun depression. So that's pretty good. Let's talk about the armor. We pull up the armor model. The upper glacis here is 80 millimeters. All right? Lower glacis is 50. So this upper glacis that was nigh impenetrable at rank 3, it's starting to become less of a thing. Right? 6.7 battle rating, you can get shot by IS-2s slinging big time shells, and you have basically 120 millimeters of armor on the front, which isn't that great. It is sloped back, so you do have the advantage of there is a chance it'll just bounce off if maybe you get lucky, because it is so heavily sloped. Now, lower plate, 50 millimeters. It means if the lower plate, on the other hand, like this, you have a chance for a ricochet. Lower plate, not really. It's sloped back a lot, but when you're down like this, if you're coming over a hill and they get the first shot, you're probably toast. Now, the gun mantlet, which is the key feature that's changed between the D and the G. On the D, it was like 110 basically all around. On the G, you have 120 on the bottom, 110 on the top. Alright, effective thickness, at its weakest, this is about 111, 110. It's basically as advertised, down the middle in like the seam. This 120 millimeter plate is basically 120 all around because it's not sloped or angled at all. It's flat to prevent ricochets into the top of the hull. Now the sides of the turret are still 100 millimeters, all right, which means that at close range, these are your best bets for penetrating. It's the weakest armor really on the front of the tank, right? Because this would be sloped too much. If he's facing directly at you, this is too much. That's 120-ish in there. This is 100. That's 110. This is 120. So this is really your best bet, right on the sides of the turret. I like to shoot right here because the gunner is back in here. So shooting here is not a bad idea. Alright, now the Panther, not known for its side armor. 45 degrees on the turret, 50 on the hull. Yeah, 40 on the, I guess, lower part of the hull, 50 on the upper part. So the side armor is pretty bad. And the rear armor obviously is bad. It's the rear of the tank. I mean, it's never going to be good. So from the front, this thing is decent. It can angle a little bit, but I mean, you start going too far and you're just too weak. This tank doesn't really have the armor to get shot all day long, but you can get bounces off this upper glacis because of how heavily sloped it is. 55 degrees, slope it like this coming around a corner, and even though it's not tremendously thick, it's still angled a lot, and that can actually be an issue for some guns without good normalization values. So let's look at the layout, because when you're fighting this thing, it's important to know the layout, and when you're driving, it's important to know the layout. So we flash up and you'll notice immediately that there's tons of ammo everywhere, right? All through the sides of the tank, down in these parts, all the way around through here. Basically any hit that goes through from the back of the turret to the front of the gun mantlet will likely ammo rack this thing. So you definitely want to protect that. The front of the tank contains the transmission, radio station, machine gun, or driver. Alright, and a little bit of ammo. So taking a hit here is not good because that's ammo and a driver. You want to keep your driver up at all times. Driver and gunner are probably the most important crew members to some degree. And that's where your gunner sits. Gunner's actually fairly protected. I actually really like where the gunner is because I was telling you that this is a good spot to shoot it. Well, you have to get lucky, right? Because that shell may penetrate but not actually hit the gunner or do anything. It might just ricochet or whatever, but that's a small target. And shooting, if you have no other option, shooting the face of the gun mantlet is decent if you have APCR. A lot of times you can hit this gunner. But when you're shooting APCR this tank, that's usually not how you knock it out. Usually you disable it and get around the sides if you're like a T-44. If you're an IS-2, just shoot it in the face and it'll die. It's fairly straightforward. You got your loader sitting on the other side, commander sitting up in the cupola, and yeah, engine in the back, fuel tanks, radiator, fuel tanks, the whole 9 yards. If you hit the back half of the tank behind the turret, the thing's going to set on fire. If you hit the middle, it's going to blow up. If you hit up here, it might set on fire as well. The side of this tank is extremely vulnerable. Shooting the turret is not a bad idea, but you're better off shooting the hull. Above the suspension and the tracks, below the turret. This is where lots of juicy things to shoot are. So yeah, that's the layout. It's actually not bad. It's better than some tanks because the thickest armor actually protects some of the key crew members, the driver and the gunner, which is nice. Now that armor won't stand up to like an IS-2, but a T-44 can handle T-44s pretty well. 85mm guns will struggle with this tank, but 122mm guns obviously will probably shred this thing if they get the chance to. Now, the main thing people have asked me about with this tank is the gun. Now, when I was playing this tank more often, the gun was a dream. It's really, really good. They've since nerfed the fragmentation spread on the gun. Alright, now, that's a minor change, but it's not even a minor change. It's actually a really big deal. Alright, you have a 75mm KWK-42, 79 rounds of ammunition. With your standard ammo, you get AP. which has decent penetration, 160 millimeters at 10 meters, 134 at 500, 109 at 1500, and 97 at 2000. 935 meters per second muzzle velocity. Well, with this shell, it means you can penetrate the front of an IS-2's turret out to 1,000 meters. That's pretty good. The issue you have is I'm not entirely convinced that the penetration value of this shell is operating as intended in the game. What do I mean by that? I've taken shots that should have penetrated and didn't with this shell and with the APCR. And you're going to see a specific replay where that becomes a factor. Specifically to highlight the fact that I think the shell should have penetrated, but it didn't, which is weird. So when I was playing this tank, I really fired a lot of AP. I didn't really fire much APCR. Nowadays, with bigger maps in, you probably should carry a fair amount of APCR. The AP is useful, but the APCR is a little more useful at range, because now you can penetrate the front of an IS-2's turret almost to 1,500 meters, which is pretty important on larger maps. But the APCR, 1120 muzzle velocity, 218 millimeters penetration at 10 meters, 165 at 500, and 115 at 1500, 92 at 2000. That's a pretty good penetration chart. You can penetrate everything this tank sees out to about a little less than 1500 meters, which is good. Now the thing is that the APCR sometimes has the same fragmentation spread as the AP. Alright. Now APCR doesn't always fragment. You have to get lucky, you have to hit the right armor and things like that. The shell actually has to fragment on its own, whereas the AP will detonate and fragment like that. So it doesn't always fragment, but the difference is that this shell actually penetrates what I'm shooting at a lot of times, and that can be more important than potentially one-shotting it. And honestly, the AP doesn't one-shot many things anyway nowadays. Used to, doesn't anymore. HE, I mean, I've never fired it. Don't fire the HE. I strongly recommend against using the HE. It's just not a good round on this tank. 75mm HE shell, this battle rating just doesn't get it done. So I've started running APCR as my primary ammunition just because I get the same effect sometimes, but the shell always penetrates more often than not. The AP just doesn't. Alright, and you're going to see that in the replays, but 10.5 second rate of fire, or reload rate, pretty good. I mean, it has a decent, it's not as fast as T-44s, but I don't think, it is faster than T-44s. I believe. Let's check, just because, I mean, I should know this, but I don't, because I'm bad. Yeah, no, it's slightly slower. T-44s fire faster. But it's comparable. And at range, that's negligible, and this tank performs much better at range than a T-44 does. So yeah, that's the in-depth look. Overview, the armor's okay. At range, it's okay. You're relying more on angling and giving your opponent the worst shot possible rather than actually thickness. It's a fairly mobile tank. Good gun depression. Armor's okay. Rate of fire's pretty good. The gun's kind of troll. And I'm not convinced it's working as intended. Now, they said the fragmentation thing was working as intended, but I don't think the penetration values are. But anyway, let's move on to the replay, shall we? Alright, so this first replay is focused more on the gun. And this is me making mincemeat of trying to kill this IS-1. And I'm following the same tactics I used back in the day when I played this tank more regularly, before 1.43 for sure. And you can you're going to see that the spread on these AP shells is definitely diminished, which is unfortunate, and I actually take a pretty big hit right there. Now my horizontal drive got taken out, but my gun is still functioning. However, his gun is broken, so he has to back up for a repair. Alright, now I'm going to take the advantage and try and sneak up on him. My turret's almost repaired. Another just a couple seconds. There we go. So I'm going to be a little sneaky here. He's kind of expecting me to come straight down this road and attack him, which is what I would normally do. However, he starts backing up, which makes me realize, wait, he's not going to have me spotted anymore. I can drop down and cause him some serious problems over this way. I'll probably get his Russian ass to shoot first. That sounds good. So I come down, and sure enough, he's not looking the right way. Alright, so I put a shell. I tried to hit the side of his turret. That didn't work. Alright, well now I have the side of his tank. Seems like a pretty easy kill shot, if I'm not mistaken. Not quite. Now this AP has 160 millimeters penetration at 10 meters. I think we're about, maybe around there, away from each other. His turret face is about 120 millimeters tops. Right, and I definitely hit it pretty hard there. But that's what I'm talking about with this gun. This is the best example I could find, is that I feel like this IS-1 should have been dead. Right? Now, that shell did something to him. And eventually we're going to kill him, but the difference is it took me so much effort to kill this guy. Like, what? You know, and that's kind of what I wanted to show with this gun, is that something's wrong, right? And I'm starting to push back here and starting to get under him. His gun is broken. He can't shoot me. He's just being annoying right now. And you see the fragmentation spread just isn't very good anymore. Which this is the moment that kind of made me start thinking, oh, maybe I should hold a lot more. So now that one went through. I thought that was a more difficult angle than some of the other shells, but anyway, it went through. I just wanted to show that real quick just to demonstrate I don't think the gun is working perfectly. Alright, so this is a simulator battle on Ash River, obviously driving the Panther G. And I'm going to fire nothing but APCR this game. This is when I was testing to see, is the APCR actually just the better round on this tank? Usually APCR is not the answer, unless you just can't penetrate with AP. More often than not, AP is the better shell, assuming it penetrates. But if the shells aren't penetrating, I mean, you need to penetrate to cause significant damage to the enemy. You can damage them from the exterior of their tank, like knock out their gun or track them. But that's not what I'm in the business of. I want to kill tanks. This is a killing machine, not a tickling machine. So I decided to play this game a little bit more cautiously. I'm coming up over onto the ridge on the far southern part of the map, as far south as I can go. This is going to basically eliminate the chance of me being flanked. I can set up at maximum range and use the penetration of the APCR to cause some problems for my enemy. Now there's an enemy tank, and the APCR is very accurate at this range, and we get the side of a T-44 and we just cook him off. No problem. The shell went right through his ammo rack. I'm just checking it out, seeing what else is around here. Now, I want to believe that AP would have done the same thing. Now, T-34A5 AI, we just went right through his ammo rack. But I think the APCR might be the better shell, and this is why. If you know the anatomy of the enemy tanks you're facing, a lot of times you can get one of these rounds through the ammo rack, and that usually causes serious problems for the enemy. Now more tanks are being spotted, so I'm kind of in a good little sniping position here. Good position where I can cause problems for the enemy. And there are tanks moving up, and I'm scanning for them, trying to see where they are. Because this simulator, so you got to spot them with the Mark 1 eyeball. Jingles quote. Just seems appropriate. Target undamaged. That's always unfortunate, but there are enemy tanks moving out of there, and I need to be. These are the guys that need to be shooting. That was just. I mean, that shot wouldn't penetrate with APCR or AP because it's just a bad angle. The shell's just going to bounce off that. But we can keep giving it a go. The T-44's front plate is actually can be a little bit of an issue. Now, it doesn't make me think that this gun is like perfect in a sense that it's working as intended. Now that shot nailed the driver of the IS-3. Alright, and I've used usually 88 APCR shells gut IS-3s, but the IS-3 is at a really weird angle. This is going to be an issue for me to deal with him easily. Fire that shell, and it just went clean through the tank, and that's understandable because APCR is a small shell, and it didn't have enough resistance to fragment, so it just went clean through. Now my front plate did bounce his 122mm shell, which is encouraging. And I tried to put a shell through the top of his tank, maybe hit the gun breech, and that would certainly cause the shell to fragment. Now, I'm aiming for his gun here, but he gets knocked out by the Tiger 2H, which is convenient for me. The IS-2 here pokes around, send one right through his ammo rack. Toast. He's cooking toast. The good news was delivered, and his beautiful fire is evidence. And this is what I kind of like the APCR for on this tank, is that when you hit something, you generally just gut it all the way through the tank. Right? The AP, I think with the nerf to the AP, I think the APCR might just be the better shell on this tank. Now that's not always true, and you shouldn't just spam the APCR on every tank you have, because a lot of times it's not the right choice. Ouch. That one hurt. The IS-2 got a free shot right through the top of the front plate. That's unfortunate. But that's what I'm talking about. This tank needs to be angled a little bit to give you some help, and when they're lobbing big, huge, heavy shells at you, it's going to be an issue. And you can see my loadout there, half and half. But anyway, this is a medium tank. You get 2 spawns. Might as well use them. So I'm going to rush forward because the fighting is really developed. They've lost a lot of players. We still have mostly everybody. We've lost 1 player. And the northern part of the map is just a rout. Like, they're running for their lives in the north. Well, they're all dead, so they're not running at all. But you get my point. So pushing them back into their spawn is a really, really good idea for us. Because we're basically going to put them between a rock and a hard place and they're toast. But we do need to worry about what they have over here. But I'm not convinced it's very much, because we do have tanks moving forward. But I'm going to take the more aggressive approach. That's what I usually do, is go to this middle ridge, below the tall ridge, but still on this part of the map. I generally go over here just because there's many more avenues of attack. There's just more opportunities over here than elsewhere, really. But we're now attacking their cap circle. The enemy are going to have to deal with that threat, and they just don't have enough players to really come back, so it's fairly certain we're going to win this game. But let's see if we can't cause some more problems while we're here. We're going to push up over here. There's the wreck of the IS-2 that we cooked off. Good news delivered. Package delivered at high velocity. Now there is going to be a T-34-85, if I'm not mistaken, who's going to be sitting around over here, and he actually calls arty on someone. I don't think it was me. My first shot guts him, sets him on fire. And at this range, 85mm gun is going to struggle. People ask me a lot of times, well, what should I do with an 85mm gun against like a Panthers armor? At this range, it's difficult. I'd say knock their gun out, shoot the face of their turret. That's about all you can do. And for example, that was weird. I didn't penetrate the T-34-85's driver hatch. Now granted, it was the top of it, but it's a little odd. This is APCR. But anyway, that shell goes right through and causes some major issues. Good news delivered. But the best way I think to fight this thing is you got to close the distance with the 85mm gun, just because it doesn't have the raw penetration that you need. Right? The T-44 gets APCR that can do the job, but the T-34-85 is going to struggle. You're going to need to get closer. And that's just the way it is. You need to get flank shots, things like that. It's just, the 85 isn't built for this. I mean, it kind of is, but in reality, in the game, it's just not all that adequate, I think, for the front of enemy tanks. But anyway, that was a simulator replay. Let's move on to a realistic replay, shall we? So here we are in a realistic battle, domination mode on Mozdok. Now Mozdok is usually a pretty good map for German guns. I think we can all agree on that. It's the wide open fields in the west are just really conducive for German accuracy and guns and things like that. And with enough armor to survive counterattack, it's a fairly safe position. However, this is domination, so we need to cap bases. I decided to go to B. The reason I decided to go to B is I'm likely one of the faster tanks on my team. Alright, German medium tank, I'm certainly faster than the heavy tanks. We have a ton of people going to A. Alright, so A is going to get captured. We are going to take that thing in force. B, on the other hand, we have quite the shrimp force going there. It looks like it's just me, maybe someone else. So I'm going to hightail it to B and try and, if they get there first, try and just harass them until more people show up and we can take it in greater numbers. But this replay is the replay that kind of made me say that the Panthers' armor is actually effective, kind of, even though it's realistically not that thick. Now I stopped to take a pot shot at a tank destroyer. That was a bold shot, but you'll notice from my layout, this is before, well, the fact that I'm not just spamming APCR, this is before I was kind of testing. I'm still using the AP and trying to gauge its effectiveness. But the enemy are in B, which is an issue, but not the end of the world. We can deal with that, I believe. But the key thing is I need to keep moving forward, get inside of them, and start harassing and really causing issues. Because they're going to probably take C because we don't have that many tanks over there. A is certainly ours. Our boys are taking that hardcore. Good news is being delivered. But B is just sort of me, and there's someone else here. Hit the top of the Su-85, didn't really do a whole lot. A little unfortunate. IS-2, priority target. His gun is way more dangerous than the Su-85s, but nothing doing there. And I'm really just harassing here. My goal isn't to move into the cap circle until I can get more effective support. And from these hit cams, you'll be able to see kind of what I'm talking about with the AP spread. It's way smaller than it used to be, which obviously is a nerf, but if it's historically accurate, I have no problem with it. It actually just took a hit, I think in the side from something. Or was that in the front? I don't know. But I took a big hit, probably in IS-2. But I'm just going to continue to work over this Su-85. I'm missing shots because I'm bad. But there we go. Good boy. Right through the driver's hatch. And even with the fragmentation nerf, that's enough to cramp the tank. And now we have... Ooh, there goes my gun. That's a little unfortunate. So I got to back up and repair my gun. At this point, the horde of teammates are now pushing on B, which means B is going to get captured. We are capturing that thing in force. Good news is being delivered, which is good. I feel like it's not a bad thing if your entire team goes to one cap point. It's a bad thing if your team doesn't go to the next cap point, right? So even though I don't like the idea of everyone going to the same cap point, the fact that they're now all moving to B is good, right? And there's people who are respawning and coming to B. So we're basically going to take this in force now. We have no one around C, so C is kind of a lost cause, but we don't need C to win. We need A and B. So A is pretty secure. B is going to be pretty heavily secured. But the key here is let's get tanks into the cap circle. Hopefully not all get bombed to oblivion. And hold out to win the game. That's the plan. Because we're going to have to hold our ground here. But I get into the cap circle and I immediately turn and angle a little bit to threats. Because there are quite a few of them. There are, I would say, lots of threats. Now, there are tanks to my side. However, they're far enough away where I'm not that concerned. Right? If they were, I mean, one of them's closing fast, but if they were maybe half that distance, I would be way more concerned. But we also have a bunch of tanks. Hopefully I'm not the only one they want to shoot at. I am sitting in the cap circle, which might make me a priority target, but you know, I need to angle against what's, I think, more dangerous to me, and I feel like all these tanks are more dangerous. And there's the cap. So now we hold A and B. They're no way going to get to A. A would be very bold if they were able to get there. But there is an IS-2, and that AP shell actually got through the face of the turret. That was interesting, right? I can't say if the APs are bugged or not, because sometimes it's like, wow, that shell really should have penetrated. Other times it's like, well, how did that one penetrate, right? There's just some weird things going on. And hopefully, I mean, if it's working as intended, it's working as intended. I wouldn't want it to be non-historically accurate for the sake of making it a better tank. That's kind of not what War Thunder's all about. So if the values are all accurate, then, you know, then they are. I don't want it to be like balance changes like we have in World of Tanks, even though World of Tanks fills its own role, which is good. It's no better, no worse. But anyway, at this point, the entire Allied team is now holding B very aggressively, which is kind of the plan now. They need to take B off of us. We don't need to take C. Right? We don't need to advance into them. We can sit in our good positions and just shell them from range, which is kind of the plan here. I'm going to spend a lot of my time in the sniper scope, going for sneaky side shots. That T-34. But I'm starting to be concerned about tanks coming along on the side. That will be a serious issue if that was to occur. But that T-44 rather, is just going to keep trying to pummel my sides, and it's never going to work. A T-44 at that range just isn't going to get it done. Alright, I don't know how that shell set him on fire. According to the hit indicator, I didn't do a whole lot to his tank. And that time I got saved by the fence, of all things. But the IS-1 and the T-44, I mean, they're not going to penetrate me at this range. They need to get insanely lucky, I think. It's just too much RNG. Too much. IS-2s, though, could be an issue. So I do need to watch out for IS-2s, and they need to be the priority target. And I think the enemy actually could have won this game, not easily, but certainly, it'd be certainly doable if a couple people had made a couple different decisions. For example, there's going to be multiple IS-2s that have the opportunity to kick me out of this cap circle that aren't going to do it. Now, granted, I wasn't the most dangerous tank here, probably. But the issue is I'm sitting in the cap circle. It means they can't cap while I'm here. Right? And every time they kill someone, it seems to me they should have cleared the cap circle and then killed everybody. Because there's not a whole lot of us left, really. I mean, they don't have a lot of tanks either. But they do have some big guns, and I feel like the IS-2 should have focused on the targets they can kill easily. AKA my Panther. I think an IS-2 can deal with a Panther fairly easily. Because if you take out the easy to take out guns, so if you knock out the Panthers, you know, that's less things shooting at you, right? In which case, now the volume of fire coming in and the volume of potential killing blows is less. So I feel like that would have been a better idea. However, obviously I can't fault them because they're in a really tough position. I mean, they have tanks spawning behind them. They have tanks all over the place. We hold 2 cap zones. It's not looking good. We have planes in the air. It's not over because there's a medium tank coming in, but it's certainly getting there. The fat lady's warming up. She hasn't started singing yet, but she's warming up, that's for sure. But at this point I was getting pretty antsy. I mean, my armor's been good to me all game long. It's gonna fail eventually. I don't grade the Panthers' armor particularly highly, but I do decide to move forward. And the reason I decided to move forward was because I just didn't want to sit in the same spot. I was trying to change my position a little bit so that the enemy don't know exactly where I am. I mean, obviously they do. I'm in the middle of an open field. But now my engine or transmission, something is knocked out, which is not good. So I got to repair for about, if I'm not mistaken, 6 cold dark centuries, aka about a minute and a half. And that could become an issue for me because I'm immobile and slightly angled down, which means the IS-2 would have a free kill right here in this Panther. But he's not going to pay attention to me, which is fine. This T-44 is still hammering away. I think all he's done is shoot at me, and nothing good has come of it yet. However, I haven't been able to do a whole lot to him. And right here I'm switching to APCR, specifically so I can punch it through the front of his turret. But that medium tank is starting to get close, and he's trying to make a hero run, and I'm calling for cover because I don't want to turn my turret, because then the T-44 could penetrate the back of my turret. But I mean, that T-44 is closing in, you know. There's a bunch of tanks closing in. I'm immobile. My front plate is taking a hell of a beating, that's for sure. I'm taking flank shots now. Are we gonna win? And fortunately, you can see all the hits I've taken there. The game's gonna end. T-44 didn't make it. Rip hero run. But I do get a sneaky shot in him, targeting him damage, of course. And we're driving a Panther, let's be real. But it was a really fun game, and it really this is the game I think that made me decide that I don't think the Panthers' armor is that bad. Even though it's not, the raw thickness isn't there, the angling is really good, and I got a fat trophy thing, which is nice. But the armor can get it done, you just need to put it in a position to get it done, which is easier than some tanks. But anyway, let's move on to the final opinion. Alright, so opinion time. What do I think of the Panther G? My issue with it is that I'm not sure the penetration on the gun is operating as intended with the AP shells. Now, Gaijin have said that the fragmentation spread was nerfed and is operating as intended. And I'm sure they have data that suggests that's how the shell should behave. And that's not a big deal to me. I mean, because this game is all about historical accuracy when it comes to tanks and how they perform and the way shells interact with other tanks, things like that. So that's fine by me. My issue is I'm not sure the penetration of these shells is working as intended, and hopefully they look at that, or they just come back and say, hey, it is. And maybe something's just going bad and I'm not noticing it. But the gun can be an issue. With APCR, that issue isn't an issue. Alright, with being able to penetrate the sides of tanks, like IS-1s at close range. But the tank as a whole is maneuverable. It's decently armored for a tank that's that mobile. It's probably more effectively armored than the T-44. However, the T-44 has the advantage of it's a much lower profile machine. This tank is much taller, and the sides are paper and made of ammo and fuel. That's not good. However, it is very similar to the other Panthers, and it performs basically the same way. So if you're used to the Panther D, alright, it's basically the same tank. It really is. You get the APCR, which is good. the gun mantlet gets changed, which is good, and it's just overall basically a very similar tank. Alright, if you enjoy your Panther D, I think you'll enjoy the Panther G and the Panther A because they are basically the same tank, and they're at the same battle rating. So, you know, basically the same thing. I mean, when you look at them, right, very similar. This doesn't have the corrected gun mantlet yet, so that's a difference. But I mean, the G and the A, they play. All the Panthers play very similarly. The D can perform more like a heavy tank, but when you get flanked, you're toast. It's not like the Tiger, who actually has decent side armor at 80 millimeters. But you will be running into IS-2s and things like that, and they will not struggle with your armor. So it's best to stay back and kind of support. Let the heavy tanks do that job. Let the Tiger 2s do that job. Just support, keep the flank secure, and you'll be golden. Alright? So I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them in the comment section. Be more than happy to read them. And yeah, I've been Corny Swiss, and I'll see you next time.